it's super important for, especially when you talk about that frontline worker, to understand their problems. Like, what are they actually,
Yeah.
what are the
What
problems
you
that
think they go through.
they
Yeah.
have? Yeah. The worst thing we can do in ideation and innovation is like, have this new hammer, which is AI, and think everything is a nail. Like, that's backwards, right? So, um, we really want to understand the customer's problems, and then that's the first place to start. And then the other thing I really learned a lot from is just watching the consumer world, like what, especially in technology, and think about the frontline worker has its mobile devices, it's in the field. Like, it's really smart to watch the consumer market first, because the consumer behavior that's being spurned by the big tech companies like Facebook and Apple and so on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My guest here today is Zack Parnell, who's the EVP of Strategy at Interplay Learning. Zack, I'm very excited to have you here today.
Hey, glad to be here.
100%. Well, let's start off with you telling just everyone a little bit more about you and about Interplay Learning, what you guys are all about, who you help, any context that you want to share about the business.
Yeah. It's helpful to kind of give a little bit of historic background. So I've been in the kind of the education, the training business since 2009, and joined a family business. Actually, my parents started in 1986. We specialized in hands-on skills development for frontline workers, primarily around the tasks of like heavy machinery, load handling and rigging and crane operations, that sort of stuff. And fast forward many years, we got into e-learning and simulation-based training, and we even developed like virtual reality crane operator simulators with major OEMs like Liebherr or Tadano. And then Interplay acquired ITI. So my company was ITI. I was the CEO of that company, and Interplay acquired us last year in 2024. And the combined company, we essentially are providing hands-on, all forms of training for the hands-on worker. So there's the hands-on worker. The spectrum's pretty wide. It goes from residential environments, commercial environments like retail or warehousing, et cetera, and then even industrials. So that's petrochemical plants, power plants, refineries, et cetera. And the frontline worker, there's dozens of job titles. So across that whole spectrum, you've got construction phase work like carpentry, electrician, plumber. You've got maintenance work, which also could include electricians, but in heavy industries, maybe boilermakers, pipe fitters, et cetera. And then in the operational phase of the built world, you've got people that are manufacturing, so they're assembly folks or operating manufacturing equipment, sort of stuff. So ultimately, Interplay today, we service that full spectrum, and then primarily develop content catalogs for e-learning plus simulation-based training that can be done on a tablet or computer, but also in VR. And we also provide hands-on training and consultative support as well.
Awesome, good stuff. Do you find? I think that's those industries that they're an interesting one, because they're often the ones that've been around for the longest. Like any type of manufacturing or any type of I guess the blue collar work, like those are the ones that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. So they sometimes can be like the slower ones to kind of adapt. Have you found that there's a lot of hesitancy from possible prospects, customers, into seeing the value that they can get from this type of learning and applying it to their company as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a slower adoption curve of technology in general when it comes to frontline workers and the companies. It's just difficult when you're managing a field workforce. Implementing technology is harder than if you're managing a knowledge worker workforce. You and I are in front of computers all day. It's pretty easy to adopt new SaaS product on our browser. For an iron worker or maintenance tech in the field, change the technology or the solution is ancillary to their core work. Especially in training, when that person's really only conducting, I mean, they might be in training mode. A maintenance tech might be learning, informal learning mode, like 1 to 2% of their time in a year. and 90% plus they're in work mode. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I think we certainly work with companies that are further along the maturity model of like
Mm.
human performance management and human capital management.
Yeah.
So I think that's important qualification step we take as a team is like,
Uh-huh.
do you have an HR manager? Like this is kind
Mm.
of on the small business and mid-market type companies.
Yeah,
Like
no, that makes sense. Yeah.
if they don't have an like a HR team and a L&D team and what historic training have they done, like it is
Mm.
really hard to just take them from that stage in the maturity model to
Yeah.
like the level that we want to get them to.
Hmm.
Much easier, of course, to work with, the Exxon Mobil's and Boeing's of the world who are much more mature on
Yeah.
people development, right? For
Yeah,
implementing
that
that.
makes sense. And that
Yeah,
makes sense. And it's interesting because I found that to be such a recurring pattern for so many of the conversations that I've had, which have now been over 200 now. It's crazy to say that out loud, but it's
yeah,
interesting that that side of business in which you have to really educate the customer on the value that you're bringing can sometimes create a huge obstacles. And so many companies that look really, really shiny on the outside are not usually the best at doing it on the inside.
yeah,
So there always has to be some form of qualification, some form of like, hey, this is the right person for us to speak with. And sure, we're gonna have to educate them on some parts of the product or the service, but we don't want them to be completely outside of the realm, or else it's just like more work for us as opposed to finding the right person for that would be a good fit.
yeah, totally. I think any enterprise SaaS company, and remind me first of all, actually, like for context, the interviews you've done are with education and ed tech companies primarily, or
Yeah,
what
it's been
kind of companies?
education, ed tech, corporate training. It's been
Yeah,
in the software development as well. It's been mergers and acquisitions. So there's been like a bit of a focus on that side of things, but
yeah,
it's been all over the place. So 1000%, any knowledge is always welcome.
yeah. I mean, the any sort of technology adoption is hard. Like people, it goes back to the book "Who Moved My Cheese." Remember that? I don't know if you ever heard of that
I'm
book.
not
Like,
familiar with that. No.
it's the most silly
Enlighten me.
little 50-page book that basically somebody moved the cheese and there's two mice and one mouse figured out how to go find the cheese and the other mouse didn't and that mouse
Mhm.
died. So it's a pretty cryptic message, but like yeah, you have to people have to adapt. And it's interesting, we as I've studied like enterprise software and just software
Yeah.
adoption for major categories like
Hmm.
CRM or security operations now and all that, those different big categories, the category has formed, and then
Hmm.
there's typically been a C-suite leader that has been formed to own that category.
Yeah.
Like Mark Benioff came on the scene with CRM to with Salesforce and really upset Siebel
Yeah.
Systems. And there were very few like chief
Mhm.
revenue officers actually before that time. I mean, that the growth of that job title
Yeah.
was crazy.
Hmm.
And then even thereafter, as kind of IT infrastructure moved from on premise to the cloud, like
Yeah.
the CIO or CTO role really grew as well,
Hmm.
right? So it's tough when you don't have that sort of C-suite representation. Like
Hmm.
in the training business, it's super rare. I mean, the most we would see was like a chief HR officer, like CHRO,
Yeah,
which
for
was
sure.
you know
And now it's like the adaptation has come through. Yeah.
yeah, that's becoming more prevalent. And honestly, it's funny, we've been challenged about this. Like in our world, serving the blue collar worker, like the craft worker, they mostly report up um,
Mm.
fully to the COO, right? Like to the operational leader
Yeah.
or um, equivalent or plant manager or something. They're not obviously, nobody hardly in the workforce reports to HR. However, the frontline worker typically, um, their needs and their training requirements are so different than the knowledge worker that we found that HR teams sometimes can be a bit disconnected from that and tough to work with.
Mm.
So we really value having plant managers and COOs involved in really improving sort of how we recruit, ramp, and
Mhm.
retain the skilled worker.
Yeah. Because then there's that full alignment. It encompasses the entirety of it, as opposed to just like make sure you get to this person, and if they don't know exactly what you're talking about and can't transfer that over to the other one, then
Yeah,
it's just like a
yeah, that's right.
conglomerate of information that doesn't lead anywhere. Oh,
That's
that's
right.
interesting. Thank you for
Well,
highlighting that.
and it's funny that any people still selling Salesforce.com know they can go right to the CRO pretty much for the decision, maybe also the CIO or CTO, right? Or
Yeah.
CTO. In our case, we've thought about coining the term chief skills officer. Like, is there this interesting combination of the blue collar, the craft worker leader that also manages their learning and development, and we don't think that, the grand scheme of things, there's not many construction or manufacturing companies that would justify that role in the C-suite, but um,
A thought to be had.
it's a thought there. Yeah, we ultimately have to encourage, the craft executives to make sure that the people development and human capital management of that workforce is really strategically planned. If you,
Yeah.
so even in really large companies, even Boeing. Boeing, if you look at Wall Street Journal the past 3 years, Boeing's been through terrible experiences with mismanagement of their manufacturing people and how they develop them and all that. And it's right in the Wall Street Journal. Like they're being interviewed by those people, and those managers are opening the kimono to describe kind of where they've went wrong and trying to improve. So it's super important for companies that literally deliver their product and service with the frontline team like that. You can't neglect that development of those people.
Yeah, 1000%. I completely agree with you. And I'm wondering, specifically because of the way that Interplay functions, I think AI has been such a buzzword for everything now. But I know that for sure you guys are doing your best to implement that as much as possible. How do you think that's affecting the workers that you guys help, or the companies that you guys help? And the reason why I'm asking is because I've had so many conversations in the podcast, but also outside of the podcast, for people that are in that blue collar industry, and where they're like, we don't exactly know where to input AI in this to facilitate the process. There have been a couple companies that I've spoken with. They have some interesting things, and like, hey, it all sounds really good, but how does it actually implement on the back end to making sure that it's translating in a good way for the workers to actually succeed, as opposed to just it's good in theory? So I'm wondering, how are you guys implementing AI into what you do to really benefit, obviously, the growth of the company, but the impact that you have as well?
Yeah, first of all, I think what would be helpful to speak about it from like, how does a company go about adopting new things, right? Like, it's super important for, especially when you talk about the frontline worker, to understand their problems. Like, what do they actually?
Yeah.
What are the
What
problems
you think they go through?
they have? Yeah. The worst thing we can do in ideation and innovation is like, have this new hammer, which is AI, and think everything is a nail. Like, that's backwards, right? So um, we really want to understand the customer's problems, and then that's the first place to start. And then the other thing I really learned a lot from is just watching the consumer world, like especially in technology, and think about the frontline worker has its mobile devices, it's in the field. Like, it's really smart to watch the consumer market first, because the consumer behavior that's being spurned by the big tech companies like Facebook and Apple and so on, Google, um, they really figure out what do people are, what apps are they using and how, so like, for example, as consumers, as our frontline workers or maintenance techs adopt Siri more, if Apple Intelligence ever gets figured out, or just general Grok or ChatGPT voice, conversational back and forth. As they do that more often, it's much more reasonable for us to think that they'll use that feature in a course we have, or even at the work phase when we're delivering work instructions or whatever. So until then, it's just hard to get that behavior change, unless the problem is really big. So like, we've already seen good adoption, very similar to Khan Academy. Khan Academy got to partner with ChatGPT, OpenAI, years ago when they were still brewing. And Sal Khan wrote about this in his most recent book. He's the CEO of Khan Academy, but they rolled out Conmigo to teachers on a pilot now, and I think they're going to roll out this soon. But they figured out really well how to implement the ChatGPT basically in coursework.
Yeah.
So we've done a very similar thing, and it's awesome. Like
Mm,
learners can use text or voice to prompt and ask questions, as they're in coursework.
mhm.
And then another really good use case, it's like I love how our team has coined this term one-on-one mentorship at scale. So like if you
Okay.
think about, I don't know, Joe, have you ever what if you had to pick, I always ask people this, if you had to pick one skilled trade that you could have been somewhat qualified in
Okay.
as a 20-year-old, what would it have been? Like, and I'm not saying you were a
Oh
master,
man.
but like what's one trade that you were the best at?
And do you mean that in like the blue collar, like the
Yeah,
roofing, HVAC, all those
yeah,
things?
yeah,
Oh man, let me think. Likely something along the lines of like I want to say painting.
yeah. There you go. Okay.
Maybe,
Like
yeah.
take your trade of painting, like despite where you're at on the skills, you might have been a apprentice painter by the time you turned 18, and
Sure.
the best way that the craft workforce has developed people, like the craft unions do a marvelous job typically at apprenticeship, and
Sure.
every local is different, but there's very high performing unions that um, take an apprentice and they partner them with journeyman or master
For sure.
painters, for example.
Yeah.
And that mentorship is so important because they're getting like formal training in the classroom for 6 weeks as they get started, and then every year
Hmm.
for 4 years. But getting the apprentice that's partnered with the right mentor on the job site,
Hmm.
or as coach to like reach out to people on the job site to just,
Yeah.
hey, feel free to coach me and
Proactiveness.
yell at me when you have to, and
Yeah.
you gotta have thick skin. But the the apprentices that do that draw that mentorship excel so much better and faster. And
Mm.
if you talk to any like master craftsman or craftswoman, like they'll tell you about the people that really pulled them along and they were their mentors. So my
Hmm.
point is, we now have simulations that do that very thing. It's
Mm.
simulations where you can be a painter in an environment, and you're being you can reach out with your with voice, obviously, and you can do this on a computer. It's
Sure.
not just VR, but
Yeah.
um, we have it both ways, where it's user has to prompt the interaction or
Hmm.
the mentorship, but also we have simulations where the mentor, we um, their name is Sam, so it's a skills
Okay.
advisor mentor.
That's a good one for the industry. I like that, Sam.
It can be a male or female, all
Yeah.
good. Um, So we have other ones that are really impressive where the mentor, Sam, is actually directing the experience, right?
Hmm.
Just like what
Interesting.
happened on a job site.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if imagine I'm a master painter, which I'm not, but I say, hey, Zhao, I'm going to take you under my wing today, and we're going to go through these several things. I want you to just be with me all every hour of this today, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what happens in simulation, and
Hmm.
they're directing the activity,
And that's
So
interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, because it sounds like you guys get the entire database that you have in the background, the knowledge that it has, possibly call recordings and everything, and then it gets embedded into Sam to lead that formation, as opposed to needing that one-on-one. Sam is the one-on-one too many.
that's right. Yeah,
That's awesome. That's
the
really cool.
one-on-one mentorship at scale. It's like, again, that
Oh yeah, well,
I
at
can't
scale. I
take credit
forgot
for
the
that
term
because
that it was.
I don't know who coined that term in our company, but it's brilliant because it
Yeah.
displays like the best of both worlds is scalability. Is
Hmm.
that we can't achieve great mentorship. Um, Not everyone's a great mentor, first of all. So like we can't achieve great mentorship for everybody,
Yeah.
but with generative AI, we actually can.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what the other axis was in one of the graphs I had, but like it is comprehensive information. Yeah, like,
Hmm.
not every mentor has all the answers. So like we get to this
Hmm.
quadrant up here that drives it both scalability and great mentorship on demand, right?
Yeah, with the quality that comes from it as well.
Yeah, and
That
you're
makes
right.
sense.
We have a lot of synthetic data. Like we've got you know tens of thousands of hours of people
Yeah.
completing simulations, and we're thinking about how to. We've got an incredible engineering team that really works on SAM, obviously,
Sure.
and the data feedback is really important. Um, so interesting. I can't divulge too much more that we're working on there, but there's some really things.
It's so cool.
In a couple of years, we should come back and
Yeah, and I'll ask you something which might be able to which I want to combine two questions into one here. One is a question that I've been asking everybody that comes on the podcast, so you're also going to be a victim of it. But I want to combine it to kind of to something you alluded there right now. I obviously don't know what the goals that you guys have for the company are. I'm assuming growth is part of those goals.
Yeah.
I'm assuming very very easy assumption
we're
for
business.
any company.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So I don't know exactly what they are, but I'm assuming that growth is a part of the process. When you're looking at that growth, what do you think are some of the goals that you have, the targets, be it monetary, be it impact wise? What do you think are some of the obstacles that get that are possibly in the way of those goals? And I'll tie it to the question that I ask everybody, which is, let's say you just had a magic wand, Zach, and you could just wave this amazing wand and it can solve one thing, one obstacle, one problem, one challenge in the company that would allow you to achieve all those growth goals. What's the one thing you want to solve?
Oh boy, boiling it down to one thing is challenging.
Yeah, there's often many.
I think most growth companies. So the stage that we're at, we're definitely into Series B, Series C territory, and frankly, ITI, was a 40-year-old business almost. So like, combining the two companies has been super interesting, and I mean, Doug, the CEO, he and co-founder of Interplay, ultimately established the company with tremendous values and found people that are driving toward or believe in the same values. I love Interplay's really mission statement. It's better careers, better lives. So we really care about delivering better livelihoods and lives to our students, the frontline worker and their companies, which have to, take care of those people, plus make a profit, make good products, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think values are incredibly important, which we do not struggle with. I think most growth companies struggle with just friction. Like as you scale, it is so easy to have needless friction in the company that causes people to get frustrated or low efficiency, low productivity, right? So like, just a big, that's probably the best way to say it. And then the methodology I like to think about and how to solve that is from Patrick Lencioni. He wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and Ideal Team Player, and then The Advantage. Yeah. So it's a really simple framework. Like we have to understand, who's on the team. And then everybody on the team, it's actually for CEOs, it's the 4 disciplines of a CEO. It's like, who's on the leadership team? And then everybody in the company, it's about creating clarity. Step 2, the clarity is around 6 major questions. Everyone in the company essentially needs to know the answer to 6 questions. And it's, why do we exist? Where are we going? What's important today, not tomorrow, like today, and then who owns what? And there's, 1 or 2 others, but that, answering those 6 questions, it's really the practice of organizational clarity helps create, clarity is the antithesis to friction and dysfunction, right? So like growth companies, they'll die from indigestion. They won't die from, what's it called? They won't
starvation.
That's right.
Interesting. So is solving that clarity that wish you would have, just being able to have that for everybody internally, but also how they view it externally?
It's an internal problem every company faces. Like it's a every stage of growth. And I've gotten to work in really small companies, and then in Interplay we've got close to 300 people today, and then I've worked in much like publicly traded company. And then as from a vendor perspective, I've really gotten to learn a lot just from watching a lot of companies from the outside in, like as big as, like I mentioned before, ExxonMobil and small contractors, et cetera. So, and I'm just a student. I really enjoy studying business and studying how teams operate well, and functioning teams versus dysfunctioning teams. But yeah, I like that. It's not, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to cop out here. Like, I think.
No, you're right. You're good, because you're kind of leading perfectly into the last question
that
I would have for you. Like, sure. Perfect. Like you're setting, like, if there is such a thing as a perfect alley-oop, you've just gave me it right now.
Perfect. Go ahead.
And I just want to ask you, do I have time for that extra question? I
know
we're
of
on
course.
the crunch here. Awesome. It's actually, funnily enough, also not a question from me. It's a question from our last guest to you. And sometimes it doesn't really fit the majority of the conversation, but this one really does. So here's what the last guest wanted to ask you, and they had no idea who you are. You ready for the question?
Sure.
What would you say has been the most important lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur and a business leader that you would like others to know?
Yeah, I got to go back to that framework. So like I am a fanatic now about organizational clarity and health.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds really boring, but I'll tell you.
No, I like it. Maybe boring to
Um,
some, not to me.
yeah, like I am a very big believer that an organization is like a team,
Mm-hmm.
and a team can be, we've all been on really dysfunctional teams where there's gossip, there's confusion, there's like frustration,
Mm-hmm.
there's bad teammates,
Mm-hmm.
and frankly, there's low results, bad results. And we've all been on, really good teams that seem to gel well, they seem to communicate well,
Mm-hmm.
all that. And, I've really become a huge fan of Lencioni's framework around how to create that. And
Mm-hmm.
it takes the entire executive leadership team to understand it and become practitioners of it. And then it takes, the department leaders and frontline leaders and so on to really understand what creates
Mm-hmm.
organizational clarity. And they are, obviously everyone in the company needs to be responsible for achieving clarity.
Yeah.
And it's a much better framework to think about when people struggle with how do I create a good culture, like that. It's sort of a black box to most people. Like
Yeah.
this framework really provides
Mm.
people with a step-by-step way, proven way that's used at companies as big as
Yeah.
historically, Ford and Boeing historically to small companies. So like,
Yeah.
anyways, if I would have known about that, um, when I first joined ITI, I would have implemented that methodology ASAP. We
Mm.
implemented that methodology in like 2019 or 2018, somewhere in there. And it
Things
made
was
incredible
different.
difference. Yeah. It's really
That's
how you
interesting.
it's how you unlock true performance in every
Yeah.
individual. And
Uh-huh.
there's a lot to it. Like it's not just the 6 questions. It's how do you drive down to
Yeah.
personal objectives and key results and
Purpose,
performance
everything else that comes
management,
up.
all that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. It's great that you bring it up because I mentioned Patrick Lencioni to a couple people, but I haven't also looked at the work in a long time. So it's good refresher for myself. But Zach,
Yeah.
thank you so much. This has been such an incredible conversation. I really appreciate your time. Where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about you, or maybe a little bit more about Interplay?
I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out there. And then, interplaylearning.com and also iti.com are our brands. And yeah, I appreciate the time today. It was great to meet you.
Amazing, Zach. Thank you so much for your time.